channel. Can you hear me now? Now you can hear me. I'm talking through the English channel. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos los que progresivamente se nos vienen
Welcome
sumando.
everyone, those who are joining us.
Muchísimo su
We want to
participación el
thank
día
you
de
for
hoy.
your participation
Vamos a
today.
esperar unos
We're
un
going
minutillo
to
para darle
wait for
inicio
a
formal a
minute
este
to give
espacio.
a formal
Los invitamos
beginning to
justamente a que se
this
vayan
meeting.
presentando
We
en
ask you
el chat,
to
nos vayan
introduce
contando
yourselves
de
in the
dónde
chat,
nos
tell
ven,
us where you come
su
from,
rol, la institución a
your
la que
role,
representan.
the institution you represent.
Y en unos minutos vamos
In some more
darle inicio
minutes, we're going
a
to
este
start
espacio.
this conversation.
Veo que se nos vienen sumando personas del Ministerio de
I see
Educación de
people from the
Guatemala, de Honduras,
Ministry of Education
El
from Guatemala,
Salvador,
Honduras, El
de Saint Lucia,
Salvador, Saint
Dominica.
Lucia,
Bienvenidos a todos y todas.
Dominica. Welcome everyone.
Vemos por acá
We also see
representantes de
here
universidades,
representatives from universities.
Católica Silva Enríquez,
In the Universidad
por
Católica
supuesto,
Silva Enríquez from Chile.
de la Universidad Mariano
We
Galvez de
also
Guatemala.
have
Bienvenidos
people from the University
acá.
Mariano Galvez from Guatemala.
Un gusto
Welcome
tenerlos con nosotros
everyone.
el
It's a
día de
pleasure
hoy.
having you here with us.
Recuerden que tienen la opción
Please remember you have the
de seleccionar
option to choose the interpretation language that you want to hear. That's going to be in English, Spanish, and in French.
Bienvenida Rosemary de la Escuela de Educación
Rosemary,
Pública de
welcome
Lima,
from
Perú.
the School of Public
Saludos a
Education
todos
from
los
Lima
de
in Peru.
Honduras.
Greetings to
Qué
World
bueno
Vision in
tener tanta
Honduras.
diversidad con
It's
nosotros el
so
día de
good to
hoy.
have so many
Justamente
people
vemos
from
que tenemos una
different
comunidad muy
places here.
comprometida en esta
We
conversación
see
que
a
queremos
very
hacer en este
community, a
año,
very
lo
engaged
cual
community
nos
in
llena
this initial
de
communication.
mucha emoción.
We are very
Tenemos por
happy.
acá el
We are
Instituto
very
Crecer
excited
Juntos del
about this. It's
Salvador.
so good to
Bienvenida,
have Instituto
Rosa
Crecer
Virginia.
Juntos from El Salvador.
Contamos con ustedes
Rosa Virginia,
justamente en el anterior
welcome.
encuentro, en la anterior
You were
conversación que
with
les estuve
us in the
contando de la
last meeting.
experiencia
You
del
told us
Salvador.
about the experience in El Salvador.
Bueno, creo que le vamos a dar
Okay,
formalmente
so we're
inicio a
going
este
to
espacio.
start this conversation
Dicho
formally.
esto,
Having said
quisiera
this,
primeramente agradecer
I would like
a
to
todos los que se
thank
nos vienen
all
sumando.
of those joining
Bienvenidos y
us.
bienvenidas a este nuevo
Welcome
encuentro.
everyone to this
Vamos a
new
darle
meeting.
inicio entonces
We
y
are
vamos a
going
empezar con
to
una grabación
start, and
también de
we're going
este
to start
espacio.
with the recording of this
Bienvenidos a este nuevo
conversation.
encuentro de nuestro ciclo
Welcome
de
to this new
movilización de
meeting and our
conocimiento sobre
knowledge
uso y
mobilization
evidencia
series
en
on
educación
the
en
use of
primera infancia.
evidence
Como
in
ustedes
early
saben, a lo
childhood
largo de este
education. As
2025
you
hemos
know,
recorrido
throughout
distintas etapas para
2025, we have
entender
gone through
mejor
different
los
stages
desafíos, las
together to better
oportunidades que
understand
enfrenta la
the
educación
challenges and
inicial
the
en nuestra
opportunities
región.
facing
Comenzamos el año con
early
algunas sesiones
childhood
centradas
education in our
justamente en la
region. We began the
relevancia
year with
de esta
sessions
etapa
focusing the
educativa
relevance
y los
of this
los
stage of
impactos
education, where we
positivos de la
discussed the
educación
positive
integral de
impacts
calidad,
of
así como
quality
los
early
principales
education,
desafíos,
as well as the
como el
main
financiamiento,
challenges
la
around the
institucionalidad, la
financing,
regulación de los sistemas
institutionalization,
educativos.
regulation
También
of
hemos
educational
tenido
systems.
la fortuna
We
de
have also
afrontar y escuchar
explored
experiencias del sector de
experiences
colaboración
of
intersectorial que
intersectoral
han promovido el
collaboration
desarrollo
that
de
have
niños y
promoted
niñas
the comprehensive
en
safe
nuestra región.
development of
Sabemos que
children
este
in
ha
our
sido un reto
region.
ambicioso
We
y
know this
retador
has been an
y este año
ambitious
hemos contado
challenge,
con
but
la
throughout this year we
participación
have
activa
had
de
the
todos
valuable
ustedes
opportunities
justamente para
to delve
profundizar en
deeper
estos
into
temas
these
y eso ha sido
issues.
fundamental.
And that has been very important. As you know, this cycle of knowledge mobilization has aimed to strengthen reflection, exchange, and joint action around early childhood education. We know that we are not the first and the only ones to make this issue as a priority. And that's why we have integrated and coordinated many networks and initiatives that are already discussing about this. I am Mar Botero. I am in charge of the knowledge mobilization strategy at KickSlack, and I will be accompanying you during this session. We appreciate you accepted this invitation. And for those joining us on Zoom, we would like to remind you that this event will have simultaneous interpretation into English, Spanish, and French. Please select the language you would like to listen in the button. If you have any questions, you can use the question and answer feature available on Zoom. We also, this is a space or a meeting full of confidence, so you're free to reach us. You may intervene, you share, and you can ask questions and exchange information with our panelists. We also invite you to share this event through your social media using hashtags such as Evidencia para la Transformación and Evidence for Change. Now let's talk about childhood education's pathways to quality early childhood education, standards, teachers training, and pedagogical practices. This is a topic that we will be discussing today. It's an honor to have so many people from the field of education. There are more than 10 countries represented here and an equal number of institutions gathered for this conversation. We would like to thank OECD, the Ministries of Education of Dominica and Guatemala, who are joining us today, and also the Rassmuss Foundation and Hands Across the Sea that will also be sharing their experiences. So we will formally begin our webinar with a few words from Raúl Chacón. He's the director of KickSlack. He has 20 years of experience in the field of education. He's a sociologist from the Catholic University of Chile, and he's got a master's degree in educational studies from Concordia University, Montreal, Canada. Raúl, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mar, for this very complete presentation. I want to continue with thanking all the people who are here, the community, the countries that are joining us, that have participated in this cycle where we have our focus in the early childhood education, because we have said that the educational quality from the early childhood matters, and it matters a lot. We thank each one of our participants and guests, and we are going to introduce them when the moment comes. So just a few introductory words about this knowledge product that we have, this educational policy note that we are just preparing to give a context about the context. And also it allows us to to see what are the challenges, recommendations that we see in the different experiences that we continue exploring, and we have learned a lot from what we have seen in the region and outside the region. So to give you a context, it's important to highlight, as we already mentioned, the main challenges the region faces. They are related to inequalities, structural inequalities that we face. We consider that we still have significant gaps in terms of coverage related to socioeconomic levels, related to the family socioeconomic levels and territory socioeconomic levels, infrastructure that is poor, limited resources, and also the teachers' training that is one of the main challenges to cover this integral training or education of children since their early childhood. And we add some crises that we are living in the planet. So as we have appointed in 2025, we have boosted or encouraged this conversation, dialogue, and learning processes, and we have had these conversations from an structural point of view that talks about the financing, the regulational frameworks, all the structures that are needed to be there. And in Guatemala, we had a second subcycle of these learning processes where we were focused on the foundational learning. One of the commitments of the region, and especially from KICS countries, that is focused in the reading and writing initial learning, that is part that opens the doors for the learning processes, but we know also about the socio-emotional learning processes, and also we need to focus also in the physical artistical development, that is the language of children nowadays. Today, in this subcycle that is going to start, that is going to continue in some more weeks with a more specific workshop where we want to analyze some concrete tools to continue working on these matters, we are focused in the discussion about the quality standards, discussing about the quality concept, the curriculum frameworks that countries are defining, and also teachers' training and effective practices behind this work. Next slide, please. So we do consider that there is a triangle that considers quality, equity, and inclusion. From SUMA, we have considered the educational development from a perspective of this educational justice. We are focused on reducing the gaps of those groups without any advantage. And our region shows inequalities, structural inequalities that are very important that we have to consider and that we should focus on. So we require adequate frameworks of their curriculum, their teachers' training that acknowledges the diversity, that they build on the diversity that is in each classroom, in each school, and also consider pedagogical practices based on the evidence. From SUMA, we have also considered the importance of, through these international meetings, and how this is contextualized into our region. How do we contextualize these experiences in our region? Of course, this is a shared commitment. With the early childhood, we know we have clear evidence about what works. Our guests are going to present different perspectives to say what they are doing, because there are some regional and national cases that show these changes are possible. And also we need this discussion about the practice, about the community that we have been developing during this year, and looking for concrete projects that may progress and show and exchange what they do in each one of our territories. That's an invitation towards a collective action to transform systems, frameworks, and practices in our countries that considers diversity with a democratic focus and of social justice, as we have appointed, and also that it contextualizes those things that give a result, that produce a result. So in order to close this introductory part, we just want to leave some questions for you. That we are finishing the third part of the third quarter of the year. So how is the quality understood in the early education? What are the dimensions of it, and how can we assess them in a contextualized way? There are some challenges that we see about the frameworks standardization and assessments standardization in different contexts. Today we're going to hear about the Caribbean and Central American experiences and some things from the South, and an international view that is proposed by OECD. So thinking about how the curriculum framework may contribute to these transitions, when we want to think about how this early education, when we move towards the primary education, and there are experiences that countries have been performing. And the last question, that is a cross-sectional question in all of our discussions and dialogues, is how to strengthen the teachers' professional development systems to guarantee those transformative pedagogic practices in our territories. So without further to say, we'll give the floor to Mar back so you continue with this presentation.
Muchas gracias, Raúl,
Thank you,
por
Raúl,
estos inputs que nos compartes
for
sobre
sharing
la
these
impresión que
insights
nos
with
hace
us and inviting us to
de sumarnos a
join
este desafío y este
this
compromiso con la
challenge and
infancia.
commitment with
A
the early
continuación,
childhood.
queremos invitar a
Now
Carlos
we
González
want to
Sánchez.
invite Carlos
Él será nuestro
González-Sancho.
primer
He
speaker del
is
día de
our
hoy.
first speaker
Carlos es
today.
analista de
He
políticas
is
en
a
la Dirección de
policy
Primera
analyst in the
Infancia y
Early
Escuelas
Childhood
de la
and
Organización
Schools
de Educación
Division
Complutense de la
from the
OECD, por
Directorate
los
of our
estudios
Education and
éticos y
Skills at
políticas
the
del 2020.
OECD. He
Forma
is an
parte del equipo de
expert in
educación y
education
cuidado de la
policies
primera
and has been
infancia,
part
donde
since
colideró el
2020 of the
desarrollo de los informes
OECD's
de
Early
políticas
Childhood
Starting Strong
Education and
7 y
Care,
Starting
where
Strong
he
8.
co-led the
Nuestro
development
Florencio se
of
recibió
Starting
por la
Strong
Universidad de
7 and
Oxford en
8
educación
policy
and
reports. He holds a
mantenimiento de la mirada
PhD on
global,
sociology
justamente sobre
from the
esos marcos
University
de
of
calidad en
Oxford. And on
educación
this
inicial.
occasion, he will share a
Y nos va
global
a contar un poco
perspective
sobre cómo ha
on
evolucionado el
quality
sector
frameworks
TECS
in the
desde
early childhood
2006 y
education,
del
addressing the
impacto y cuál
evolution
es el
of the
rol de los
concept of
estándares y los
quality,
marcos
the role of
pedagógicos y
standards and
curriculares
curriculum
que se nos
frameworks, as well
plantean
as the
en cuanto a
tension
la estandarización y
that
la
are
evaluación.
related to the
Así que, Carlos, si te
standardization
escuchas
and
puedes dar
evaluation.
nuevamente, te
Thank
cedo
you
la
so
palabra.
much, Carlos, for being here with us. You have the floor. Thank you, Mar and Raúl and the other colleagues from Suma Kixlac for this invitation for the OECD. It is really satisfactory to continue with this cooperation with these organizations, and it's a pleasure to contribute in this third cycle. I'm going to share with you a presentation. Can you see that?
Perfecto.
Yes, we can see that. Again, thank you so much and welcome everyone. So my intervention is about the standards, the curriculum frameworks, and the quality as instruments in the quality of the initial education. That's a perspective of from the countries from the OECD. So, the structure of the presentation, I'm going to try to touch on some concepts such as the educational quality, the role of standards and curriculum frameworks for the improvement of quality. I will try, as Mar mentioned throughout the presentation, to reflect on some tensions about standardization and assessment or evaluation, and to talk about some specific considerations for the context of Latin America and the Caribbean. So I wanted also to show you this information. This presentation is mainly based on these reports that you can see here from the OECD. They are available in our website. They are for free access. And our colleagues from SUMA will also share the links. So if you may want to access these links, the reports, the Starting Strong 6, Starting Strong 8, from 2025. So the first reflection, and I think we all know this type of concepts, the quality is a multidimensional concept in the early child education. I'm going to talk about the structural quality and processes quality and their influence on the different objectives of the early development of children. About the structural quality, we talk about more distal indicators related to the context, physical, human, and material resources in the sector and in the educational centers, and also the processes qualities related to the proximal processes or factors where they have a closer connection with the day-to-day experience of children and their development. As you can see, the arrows in the diagram show that the structural quality will influence the quality of the processes. The quality of the processes will have an effect on the development of the children. And the question is there any kind of impact from the structural quality in those objectives in the center? So I want to share with you some results of this meta-analysis that we performed at the OECD that are in the in different reports mentioned. We see a revision of the literature. We see the evidence between the relationship between structural characteristics, the lower child staff ratio, the smaller group size, the qualifications of the staff, and other factors. And what is the effect that evidence shows for the interactions and in the results? So what we found in this meta-analysis is that the evidence is clear about the positive aspects of structural quality, about the quality of the processes. And these are conditions that allow these interactions that are going to be centered. And in this case, the interaction between educators and children, the evidence is less, it concludes less about the direct impact on the structural factors in the development of the children. But it is important to say that we have this positive relationship that is well documented and related to the quality of the process.
So later, what we have seen, and we have tried to promote from the OECD, is that we need to go beyond the structural quality. So interactions, significative, valuable interactions amongst the one experiencing, I mean, what children are living in these educational centers are the very core of quality. That is our main message. And we're talking about the interactions of children with other children, with educators and teachers and other professionals, all of the adults with a certain responsibility in their development, and the surrounding, the materials, physical elements. This is the core related to quality in processes. How those interactions enrich and motivate children in different dimensions. The evidence coming to this meta-analysis, we did analysis on how quality of interaction, positive interactions, has an impact on the skills of children. And the evidence is quite clear that at least in the development of writing, reading, mathematical skills, there is a positive effect. Different studies and aggregated results show a positive effect, which is clear. Once again, evidence it is not so consistent when talking about other types of dimensions of development, which is the socio-emotional development. Over here, studies, there are different results in these studies. And the evidence it is not so clear, but at least in some areas of development which are the easiest to measure, it is positive. So what we can also see is that when interactions are negative, related to conflict, lack of warmth, human warmth, the results, especially in socio-emotional skills, are negative. So the quality of processes are an important element in the development of children. Now let's go into which is the role of the quality standards. Quality standards, it is a general term for talking about two conceptual frameworks, normative and the ones related to assessment, which facilitate the quality of education. I'm talking about structural quality and also processes. The idea here that we have been developing is that setting these goals of quality, which are here in this type of frameworks, are useful in order to consider the political support, investments, align resources and priorities in a strategic manner, for instance, allocations of budgets, and in order to build a vision, shared vision, a consensus in the educational system and sometimes in societies over the need of an education for children of high quality standards. When we talk about services, may reduce the differences of resources because of its allocations and goals, and therefore quality, it is uniform or standardized in the system for families. Standards are also important. They need to know if programs, services are following these standards. It make families easy to choose where to send their children. For children, they have minimal ambitions in order to develop some skills. And these standards are also useful to regulate in a more transparent fashion and with common goals known for everyone, especially for the private sector, with an important presence in the children education in many countries. Talking about tensions that we have talked about before, standards, of course, have some goals which are general, with a formulation level which is sometimes abstract and quite general. And this is interesting. But maybe one of the most interesting things in the latest report is that we have offered the idea of advancing in the sense of combining universal approaches and specific ones. That is to say, standards need to be wide, need to cover different areas, curriculum, professional qualification, structural factors, monitoring, but they must do it in such a way that they combine universal approaches, the central column of that slide, those are standards and regulations which are applied to the whole system, but at the same time, there should be space for some flexibility, adaptation. Just an example. In the sense of curriculum, we consider that the standards which are applied to the set of the system need to cover different developments related to the development of children, cognitive, physical, socio-emotional. Playing should be the core of everything, and they need to be applicable in different types of services. That has to be applied universally. But at the same time, going to the column on the right, there must be a space for curricular adaptations especially considering local aspects or some groups of students or children. That is essential. Combination of what's universal and also specific or more centralized or specific to depending on the scenario. Curricular frameworks from the OECD, those are instruments which are essential for favoring interactions of good quality. Among some other goals, they are useful to give visibility to the goals of learning, of well-being development. They offer a structure and an action logics in the gradual evolution related to ages, pedagogical sequences for obtaining goals. They're also good for harmonizing practices and therefore the quality levels. Once again, to show families what's happening in the educational centers so they better know what type of interactions are occurring there. And they also give a status, a recognition to the profession. It is a way to professionalize the role of teachers, educators, children educators are caregivers. So therefore, curriculum can have many different roles, complementary roles or functions. Some findings that I want to share with you about some surveys that we have done in countries in the latest years around what type of curriculums they have implemented, how they are articulated, how they are monitored, and so on and so forth. A first glance or finding, which is interesting, is that we saw that, for instance, the mandatoriness of curriculums, it is not so. This being mandatory, it is stressed in the ages between 3 and 5 and not really between older ages. So it is much more mandatory at early ages, 3 to 5, and there is more space with younger children. A quarter of the countries and regions, there is more than one curriculum for the same group of children, different group of age. It was maybe because there were different organizations in charge of that, and sometimes curriculums coexist, and that is sometimes not so clear in terms of obtaining goals. And there's a certain number of countries where there's no curriculum framework, especially for some groups. So we believe that the absence of curriculum, or when there are too many, it may more difficult to obtain goals. When there are too many, when there's no existence of them, it is difficult or hard to follow a guideline. Another important point is that these curriculum frameworks need to have an evolution, natural evolution, depending on the age of the children, and comparing in these three circles the type of curriculum existing for different groups of age. We see that curriculums for children between 0 to 2 in countries or regions where they are present, they are created in terms of general concepts, principles, values, as it should be, with an early children development, and as curriculum applied to older children, we see that there is a formulation which is more frequent in terms of traditional areas, academic areas. That is to say, they align with the first years of primary school. So we see this is a natural evolution depending on the age of children, maturing process, and the type of goals they are pursuing. And this is positive. Curriculum, though are general standards, they have an adaptation related to age of children, the age of children. Some notes about monitoring. Curriculum frameworks are really important. And the creation and formulation of them, it is, I mean, the follow-up implementation is as important in order to know if we're really taking into practice all of these frameworks. In this survey, what we saw is that there is a follow-up which is not equalitarian in terms of monitoring practices, external ones, external assessments, and the frequency, the monitoring of curriculum frameworks. It is more frequent when in pre-primary school, 3 to 5 groups, and in early ages, curriculums exist, but they're not monitored on a regular basis. And this allows me to go into some reflections, which we're going to have about monitoring and assessment or evaluation. In children education, just like in other educational levels, we see that monitoring and assessment combine two main goals. On the one hand, accountability and respecting regulations, which is so important, and at the same time, the improvement of quality of learning processes for professionals, for different services. So these two goals are not incompatible. They are overlapped somehow, but they're also different. There are many different tools. Monitoring and assessment can be done through inspections, external inspections, observations, self-assessment, service, polls, many different instruments. And maybe the strategy, successful strategy, it is combining these two spheres properly, these two goals, and the diversity existing, I mean, in a balanced way. So all of the goals are met that we could expect from the curriculum frameworks and the quality standards. So there should be an alignment between the monitoring tools and assessment tools and those general frameworks. Some messages from the report, Studying Strong 6 report. It emphasized the monitoring of quality, how monitoring of quality can contribute to the improvement. And I want to highlight some messages from this report. The first one are the benefits of developing quality frameworks which are wide and coherent. By wide and coherent, we mean covering different groups of ages, different types of services, private, public, and so on and so forth, different programs. No one should be outside this framework. They should be aligned with quality criteria in primary education for allowing transitions and having, above all, a focus in the quality of processes, and not forgetting the structural quality. Setting a common notion of understanding, give me just 1 second, common understanding of quality standards. This requires sometimes having materials for spreading these standards. Those should be materials which are easy to understand for different publics, not being contradictory. They should be consolidated. And there should be monitoring methods which are appropriate both for structural quality and the ones for related processes. Those methods are not the same necessarily. Two more important messages that we have seen in OECD countries, it is an increase in self-assessment. We don't only need monitoring and external processes, they are important, but many countries from OECD are emphasizing more and more the need of assessment, a culture of continuous improvement in the sector. This is supporting centers, services at a micro level, at a local level, so they're able to self-assess them a critical assessment in order to improve. And they should also have some support for these processes. At the same time, it should be important, and this self-assessment should be important. Results should be public as well. But more and more, there should be an approach top-down, but also a self-assessment, which is also important from the very base of the system. And finally, a series of another message is the need of not only having those tools of assessment and monitoring, but if we want to support improvement, centers need practical resources. They need supports which are available for all of different centers and supports which are adapted to the needs. Distinguishing the responsibility of agencies, not confusing. For instance, accountability with improvement processes. There should be agencies or bodies, specific bodies, for these two types of goals. And spreading good practices in the monitoring and the improvement of quality. Those are some of the key messages that we'd like to share. I'm going to conclude with some questions, additional questions from our experience with our experience in Latin American countries, especially when talking about these frameworks. One is that we have seen that many of these countries, and there are strategies of children, multi-sectorial strategies, and what we're seeing here, the reflection is the need of aligning the quality standards of children education within more global strategies, where some other sectors are participating, not only education. This requires coordination of policies and services, assuring quality not only within the educational sector, but in coordination with some other sectors. So that is one first reflection. Maybe the most important one, it is attention that we see in many countries, where there is an expansion to access to children education. The sector is growing, and this is an excellent news. But there is a fast growth to serve a requirement. It may compromise quality, though, especially when we're talking about hiring professionals, infrastructure, because it is growing too fast, and quality standards are not easy to maintain when we have a demand which is big, or many people to serve. And the question is how to find a balance between expansion and keeping the quality standards. And a final reflection that we have seen in some cases is that there are some capacity challenges. One is monitoring at a central level from ministries and central agencies, oftentimes using data and evidence in order to create the monitoring. And at a local level, the capacity in order to create this critical reflection, in order to implement improvement plans related to the monitoring. Those are some of the reflections. So now I believe you can contribute with some more answers than the one we have from the OECD, with contexts which are concrete in Latin America and the Caribbean. But I just wanted to offer these questions for debate. So with this, I'm finishing, Mara. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carlos, for your presentation. I want to go back to one idea that you shared, which is the importance of having quality in the initial education as a construction which is multidimensional. These interactions, significant, meaningful interactions, are the very core of this development, this learning, and this well-being. This standpoint, it is deeply connected with the Latin American context. This is a clear invitation in order to advance into those more coherent curriculum frameworks. Carlos, we'd like to open the space for some reactions, immediate reactions from the public. You saw that these thoughts are so interesting. One, maybe someone has a comment or a reaction or maybe a question. So please, the floor is open. This is a space where we can all trust each other. We have different voices here. Education ministries, civil society, actors, universities, so on and so forth. So maybe we're going to have 1 minute for people to ask a question. So let's see. You can raise your hand. And Nadia. Yes, we're going to share these presentations and we're going to translate them into English and French so you can all access this information. Are there any initial reactions or comments? Let's see.
Aquí me llega una pregunta por interno.
Carlos, there's a
Veamos.
question over here.
Desde tu experiencia, Carlos, nos la preguntan desde El Salvador. ¿Cómo puede un país comenzar a
This question is from El Salvador. How can a country be focused in the interaction and the quality of the processes without having the basic conditions covered? What's the starting point? Starting point? Okay. I think that it is true that if the structural conditions, when they are not there, it is complicated. But we need to progress in this understanding that structural conditions are the beginning, are conditions that allow a better quality of the processes, but we could call them necessary conditions, but not enough or sufficient conditions. We know that meeting those structural conditions do not lead us to the quality levels that we want, but they are not incompatible. We may progress in the two directions in parallel, but what cannot happen is that we should only focus in the quality of the processes if we do not have behind the minimum structural conditions. These ones should not be. It's not that we need super like incredible facilities, but we need to have high quality of processes when we have the right or the adequate structural conditions. So we need to identify the moment in which the structural quality is a hustle, it's an obstacle. And we need to know where to invest to a certain extent. And let's remember that the quality of the process is the core, is the final core or the final objective. That's a gradual process. To start from scratch is quite difficult, but still, one should go along with the other, and the structural factors do not need to reach the ratio of a more developed country or more prolonged experience in early childhood education, but having the right conditions with the right ratios, we can do a lot of things there. Marcelo asks, I don't know if you may want to ask yourself. You have the audio activated. Maybe you can ask the question by yourself. Okay, so greetings from Chile. So what's the role that you consider the university should play in terms of the quality of education? Because the transitions from the early childhood, then school period and stage, and then secondary school, it seems the barriers continue to advance if we do not consider the initial problems, and that happens, and that will have an influence in the future. So how do we help, or how can we support what we couldn't do when they were children or in their early childhood education, and how can we fix that in the subsequent stages or cycles of life? So the question is about what can you do from the university, from the centers of research. I would point two things. First, the documentary research. We need to document these problems about the lack of quality, about the lack of compliance of certain objectives, the need of higher investments and better processes. So the research to bring this information to the light, that's an important contribution. A second contribution, if I have understood well, maybe the training. Maybe this was part of the questions. From the university, where we train teachers of early childhood education, what we need, and that's, I think the cycle will continue in future sessions about this teachers' professional development, and that the university programs for the early childhood education or the training of early childhood education teachers. It's important to be focalized on this training of teachers, of those assistants, of those people who work there. So the curriculum of studies of professionals and their training should also be aligned with those curriculum frameworks and the standards of quality. So with this, it would be worthless if the training is not aligned with this. So the idea is to continue to be aligned with those standards and in their contribution as a training company or a training university. Thank you so much, Carlos. Nicolás, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I am Nicolás from Argentina, but I am quite close to the office of your offices. My question is this one. It's about these things about evaluation and accountability. What is the role of the contextualization of practices when schools are allied or are aligned with other actors that are not under the umbrella of the education ministries to innovate in practices, for example, with NGOs that provide infrastructure for AI? So, what is what's the role of the self-evaluation of a school with the relationship of the related to the accountability with the government or the ministries? Thank you, Nicolás. I should say that maybe that's not something I'm related to or I'm familiar with. But I would say in this accountability, it's a very important, has an important role in the maintenance of these minimum quality levels. So we have these mechanisms of the ministries, let's say the financing or the licenses for the operation of different schools and services, access to public finance, operational licenses or expansion licenses. There should be an important mechanism there where they have to comply with these standards and quality criteria. The next step probably that you mentioned about the collaboration of certain centers and services with other actors and innovation is probably more related to internal improvement processes. And I would say that the role of the central agencies and ministries is not to block those innovation centers. We have to give a room for experimentation, but without giving up the basic levels. So only being part of these dynamics could be counterproducing, and we have to be flexible. What we need, what is allowed in the processes of local improvement, of course, they have to be contextualized, but it's not the same formula. Not the same formula of improvement. It works for all the contexts. So I would say that a general answer is to maintain that general framework of evaluation and give certain room or space to experimentation and innovation, and also being rigorous with them to see what the results of these experiments and innovation practices are and how they contribute to improvement. And if they are improving, we have to diffuse those good practices. If we see there is a successful evaluation of those experiences, maybe the role of those public central agents is to diffuse them, is to show them.
Muchas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I have a question related about the good practices from Dominica. I'm going to translate that very fast. One of the challenges in the Caribbean is how to adapt these global or national curriculum frameworks to different types of contexts. Have you seen good practices or strategies to adopt those frameworks without losing pedagogic coherence? Yes, of course. I understand that in the Caribbean context, this can be a question that is an important question for this context and for many other contexts of the OECD. Let's say, for example, countries such as Canada or Australia, to give important examples or well-known examples, the presence of autonomous, autochthonous people and cultural minorities has a wide recognition and acknowledgement in the curriculum framework. And there's no there is no delay in the objectives, or a backlog. But the formula is to try to find this or try to make a balance with the universal focus with the adaptation capacity to the reality of a country. There might be adaptation of curriculum references, contents in certain communities that are curriculum that have a greater pertinence, using, for example, different languages in the country and different cultural references, and these can be adapted without giving up the learning objectives. There is a variation of context and context, but it's important to acknowledge these diverse realities, and what makes no sense is to impose in a social and cultural diverse reality a framework that is that does not consider the local and the community context. And we see that in different countries of the OECD, the linguistic reality of many centers, even in urban areas, it's still missing, but we see people with children with special needs that are curriculum adaptations to different groups. And that is the pathway to follow, not to give up the adaptation and finding a balance with what should be a common denominator. We believe from the OECD both things are possible. One last question, Carlos. The question is, in some countries from Central America, the NGOs support the educational sector. They exceed in some moments the support from the government, but they cannot have a good articulation to develop that, to create that educational development. Do you have any example in Latin America, if you have that information mapped, or any other reference that you may have about this, like this contribution? Concrete examples, or I had a recent experience in the Peruvian context. There is this a very strong tradition of different NGOs playing an important role in their childhood education. Many times, we have to look for a formula that would allow to join the different efforts and the different resources. The activity and of these type of institutions and in the non-public sector is very important. Also in the European context, in the Netherlands, there is a presence of charitative institutions like non-profit organizations because they are from the private sector, because they are not under the umbrella of the ministry, but they are not in organizations with a profit purpose. So we have to see the difference between these different organizations out of the government sphere, and we have to understand these quality standards and curriculum should be applied to a segment of the system. If there are tensions, there should be a dialogue based on different objectives that are part of the role of the central ministry to dictate and they should be consensus objectives, and they do not come from only one actor. We need a previous dialogue to resolve those tensions, a dialogue to agree on those objectives and frameworks, and a certain degree of autonomy in the day-to-day operation. But maybe the most important thing about the curriculum framework is to reach a social consensus and within the sector about the great quality objectives. And this is a process that takes time, that requires the dialogue of the different parties. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for your presentation, your generosity, and to answer all those questions that are pending to answer. We will send them to Carlos, and the idea is to deep dive in this conversation, and you have access to these good practices and references. We would like to move towards some more national and regional experience, learning from experiences of different countries and the Eastern Caribbean countries. The next panel includes people from different organizations, representatives from the state, from the government, from the academia, and the civil society. In this panel, we have the presence of Dr. Brenda Borrayo. She's the head of early childhood education at the General Directorate of the Educational Quality Management for the Guatemalan Ministry of Education. She is a teacher of children with special needs and holds a master's degree in education with a specialization in early literacy teaching. We also have Veda George. She is an early childhood education coordinator at the Ministry of Education of Dominica with more than 35 years of experience. She's a specialist in special education and early childhood leadership with the University of the West Indies in Mico University College in Jamaica. We also have Alix Anson with us. She is a specialist in the Cambridge University in early literacy, and she has worked with different programs of the Rassmuss education, and she has over 35 years of experience as a teacher trainer in literacy and multisensory learning. She has worked in Chile and in the Eastern Caribbean countries supporting professional development programs. Thank you to our panelists for joining us. I want to verify they are here with us. I have Veda here. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Hi, good morning. Good
Good morning,
morning.
Veda.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Muchas gracias. Ok, bueno, vamos a empezar este panel
Okay,
entonces.
so we're going to start with this panel stating one general question to our panelists that will allow us to introduce the conversation about the strengthening of the quality of the early childhood education and the role of that curricular frameworks, inclusion, teacher training in your experience. I want to start with Dr. Brenda.
Licenciada, en Guatemala, el Ministerio de
In
Educación
Guatemala, the Ministry of Education has prioritized early childhood education through curriculum guidelines and programs aimed at improving the quality and relevance of services in a context marked by the cultural diversity and equity challenges. From your experience, from the experience in the ministry, how have you approached the strengthening of the quality in the early childhood education in your context? And what role have curriculum frameworks, inclusion, and teacher training played?
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be here, sharing with you all. Greetings and hugs from Guatemala. We like to be called the never-ending spring country. But basically, I want to tell you that in Guatemala, we are giving our first steps when serving first infancy. We're a team of work we're rather new in terms of, work. Well, talking about age, we're not so young, but well, we're addressing a social debt that we have with the country. So as a country, in the year 2008, we created for the first time the national curriculum, which is specific for serving the first infancy. And this faced a population with an idea and a strong conception about what serving first infancy is. Taking care of first infancy. So that is one of the battles that nowadays we're still having. In Guatemala, believe that what children need is just need to receive care, not to be hurt. In the year 2008, we had an impasse, a difficulty, because we didn't have many different actions for serving the first infancy. And in the year 2019, was implemented a community program for serving first infancy. We are having 5 years of having started that process of service, or the service for first infancy. And we have deficiencies which are too strong. We have had an assessment done by the Ministry of Education where we have found that the program, it is not having a positive impact in the children's development. On the contrary, in some regions, the development is being affected. And when we try to set and identifying why this is happening, we have found that it is a program that has a work of volunteer mothers. So that leads that we as an institution are validating practices which are not appropriate for rising up and serving first infancy. So due to this situation, we took many different decisions. The first one, we're having an intersectorial work. It is a government initiative called Hand to Hand, hand in hand. So in municipalities where municipalities are having difficulties, homes should have access to drinking water by using an eco filter, and they are repairing walls. This is not done by the Ministry of Education, but we are there especially for serving first infancy. And we have found that we do not have, in the country, we don't have trained people to serve first infancy. So we started there. We need to train people serving this first infancy, these children. We started with a virtual diploma certification, and we're now, this year, we just created, it has 3 courses. We're now implementing it. We have created material, highly mediated material, and the hardest part is making sure that materials are mediated enough so people from these communities, from the rural areas, because oftentimes they do not speak Spanish. Spanish, it is their second language, and their levels of reading are really low. So this mediation of the material, it has been one of the biggest challenges. We have also created a monitoring system, virtual monitoring system. So these 200 people that are working with us in that process of starting this training and serving first infancy, so they can report and have a record of how much they are advancing and the improvements. We also have, since last year, we have created a policy for serving the first infancy that favors us, especially for the intersectorial work, because it has clearly defined goals when talking about health and caregiving and services which are being provided. Besides that, I believe that one of the most relevant factors has been that we have been managing, and that means plenty of time, allocation resources, children libraries. We still haven't got to have those libraries yet. They should be here by the end of the year, but not for everyone, because that is a really high investment. And we are working in the creation, at least in models of infrastructure, minimal infrastructure for serving the first infancy. Those are not schools, those are safe spaces for saving some groups of around 20 children. And we are now in the process of managing this with some different entities, because we have, the authorities of our country are now widening and favoring these economic resources to invest in first infancy. We're just starting, as I told you, and part of that starting, it is the modification of the curriculum that came from the year 2008. Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you for your intervention. We celebrate this increase in the investment. First infancy, we know, it is not only investing more, but we need to do it better. That is good news. I now want to give the floor to Veda. In Dominica, the expansion of access to education in first infancy is being together with some initiatives, both at a regional level and national ones. This O-Expert program is one example. Pages of Hands Across the Sea, which is together with us. So now, the same question that I asked to Brenda, from your experience and in the framework of the Ministry of Education in Dominica, how have you addressed the strengthening of the quality in early childhood educational care, and which is the role of this curriculum?
So good morning again. Thank you, Mark. Good morning to the panelists, everybody on listening. I want to say thank you to Kickslack and Suma for allowing Dominica this opportunity to be part of this important webinar. We are the nature island of the Caribbean, and we are between Guadeloupe and Martinique. Sometimes we are mistaken for the Dominican Republic. So I want to say that we are the Commonwealth of Dominica and not the Dominican Republic, okay? So for us in Dominica, early childhood education really began by the Roman Catholic Church through the social center. And at one point in time, the Ministry of Education had seconded an officer to the social center to assist with implementing the programs and creating access. So the social center had gone ahead and they had built a number, I think about 15 preschools. At that time, we had no government-owned pre-kindergarten or preschool. But in 2003, the focus began to shift. And in the Education Act of 1997, which made provisions for pre-primary education, was amended to change to early childhood education. So that took on board the children from 0 to 2. So now when we speak early childhood education in Dominica, we refer to that period of development from 0 to 4 years before they begin formal education at 5 years. At that time too, we developed regulations. So there was a heavy thrust on regulations on quality, and the regulations were developed and ratified, thankfully, and we now have a legal document, which is Statutory Rules and Orders, number 39 of 2003, which helps us to regulate the sector. At the same time, in 2005, we also established a multi-sectorial committee, the Council on Early Childhood Education, which helped the Ministry of Education in monitoring what was happening. At that time, too, centers were rapidly growing, right? So it became very necessary to have that body to help in ensuring that quality, was maintained within the standards. Now, this was further strengthened with the implementation of universal access to early childhood from 2012. So the government made that pronouncement that we are going to implement universal access to early childhood education, having already recognized and realized universal access to primary education and universal access to secondary education. So it was gratifying to know that we now have universal access to early childhood education. Now, under this initiative, we took the bold step of ensuring that every primary school would have a pre-kindergarten attached to it. So to begin with, we went into the primary schools where we had existing spaces. We upgraded these spaces, not just the classroom space, but the outside space, the washroom space. And if there was an existing pre-kindergarten or preschool in an area that was not developmentally appropriate, we brought in that preschool. If there was no preschool, we created access for the first time. We also went ahead and constructed new pre-kindergartens that are annexed to the primary school, government primary school. So now we can boast of 7 new preschools that have been built. And The decision is that going forward, every primary school on island, government primary school on island, will have its own preschool attached to it, okay? To assist with monitoring these pre-kindergartens, the programs that are offered at the pre-kindergartens, the Preschool Development Committee was also ratified. So at the time when we had the universal access, there was a steering committee put together to, to help the government to implement the initiative to kickstart. And we came up with the Preschool Development Committee. I must say the Preschool Development Committee came from a preschool that was already existing in a primary school prior to 2012. I want to take the opportunity to really single out the PT7 primary preschool. They had a committee in place, and as part of the steering committee, it really gave me the idea of putting this committee together to help the school in maintaining the program. Now, this Preschool Development Committee is like a subcommittee of the National Parent Teachers Association at the primary school, okay? Now, quality was the watchword, and it continues to be the watchword. Initially, I said that there was an officer who was seconded to the social center, but because now the thrust had changed and the emphasis was more on government creating access, we established an early childhood development unit, right? So hence, Veda being here as the early childhood coordinator today. So two other positions were established. So we have the assistant early childhood officer for early stimulation, and this officer is responsible for the cohort from 0 to 2 years, and another officer for early education, and that officer is responsible for cohort from 3 to 4 years. So now when we speak early childhood in Dominica, it's from 0 to 4 before they start formal education, all right? Now, the early stimulation program, there was an early stimulation program that used to be practiced by a private organization. At the time, it was CCF, Christian Children Fund. And in 2016, this early stimulation program was institutionalized within the Ministry of Education. So today we have the roving caregivers program where the caregivers go into the homes of families and they provide early stimulation to children from 3 months up to 2+ before they enter a preschool, either in their community or wherever it is that they choose to go, all right? I must say that while we are increasing access as a government, we also encourage private partnership. We know that as a government, we cannot do it all and we need everybody on board. So we still have a number of private preschools that are functioning on island. We treat them just as we treat our government pre-kindergartens. So to ensure that their programs are sustained, every term we will provide them with a subvention, a monetary subvention that ranges from $1,500 to $2,500. Unfortunately, at this time, we are working towards that, but we have no government-owned daycare centers. All our daycare centers are private. So this is where we are.
Muchas gracias, Veda, por esa intervención.
Thank you very much, Vera, for that intervention. I believe we all celebrate the advancement, important advancement that you have had in Dominica, precisely guaranteeing the access, universal access that we know that in the case of Latin America, it is still a big debt, historical debt. I want to go to Alix. Alix, you're most welcome. We know that Rassmuss Foundation has promoted innovative initiative to strengthen initial education, especially in early reading and writing. Tune up with the questions that we have just made to Brenda and Vera. From your experience, could you please tell us a bit how the foundation has contributed to the strengthening of quality in initial education in these countries where you have implemented, and which are the role that curriculum frameworks have had in teachers' training?
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Very big questions, and I hope I have some answers from the Rassmuss Foundation's point of view. Just to give a bit of context to explain our link with early childhood literacy is that we started with a focus on grade 1 and grade 2 in Chile. And that has been our main focus since 2018. But through that process, we hit the pandemic. And when the pandemic came along, we couldn't reach all the families that we were trying to reach easily. And so we created an animated television program, which was then available to all age groups. And it was through doing that program that we saw that the methods that we had used, which were really linking the two sides of the brain of what a symbol looks like, what a sound you link with it, how you can blend the two together, that this had actually reached a far younger audience than we had initially thought it might. And we had even littler children who'd come through, who'd learnt the song, who'd learnt the actions, who'd put two and two together with these simple visual combinations. And that showed us that actually what we were looking to do with building early brain architecture in our grade 1 and grade 2 children was equally applicable to younger children. We were heavily inspired by the University of Harvard's website, the Center on the Developing Child, all their information that they deliver about how that brain architecture is built. And we learnt through our program that if you can make learning fun, engaging, multisensory, structured, cumulative, and provide really hands-on activities, little children, even small children, can learn wonderfully how to put sounds and sight together. And then that gives them a platform that then can take them into the early stages of school when reading becomes more formal. So our real, I hope, contribution to the work that we did in Chile and have now taken to the Caribbean has been taking a very multisensory visual approach and offering a structure, a very clear structure, and taking all the learning objectives which Chile provides, very comprehensive learning objectives, and focusing in on not what to teach, but the how. Because so many teachers leave teacher training, and in Chile it's 5 years of teacher training, it's a lot, and in other countries it's not as much as that. But even after 5 years of teacher training, you may not still be sure, how do I encourage a child to learn a letter and how do I link the two together? So I have just a few slides because to see it in action will explain it. And I wondered if I could just show a couple of slides to show what I'm talking about in this building of brain architecture, which leads, of course, into metacognition and so many other topics that
Claro
are.
que sí, Alix. Por
Thank you.
favor.
So I'm hoping that it's going to work here for me to show you what I mean by these connections and how it is relevant. So what we tried to do was, both in our work in Chile and then very much more recently in the Caribbean, is to take the most simple ideas that are going to come up in grade 1 in school of how you link a letter to a sound. And rather than giving an apple sitting upright for the ah sound in English with the stalk in the air, we've decided to try and make each of our images match the shape of the letter. So from the word go, the two sides of the brain have a natural motorway and a natural connection, so that the sound on one side is connected to the shape on the other side. We also really looked at how to reduce memory load, because if you show a child a capital letter, a small letter, all at the same time, and you give, oh, here are 10 other words that you can do with this connection, that can be memory overload for very small children. But if you give them one thing to connect it to and really get that cemented first, that connection can then become like the growing branch in the tree of brain growth that will take them further on and further up. So you have here a sample of our letters in English. We have some of the same in Spanish, and of course it needs to be contextualized to the country that you have designed the program for. So we designed the program for Chile, but when we went to work in the Caribbean, it had to be right for the Caribbean, and therefore we co-developed all our resources with the teachers in each of the countries to make sure that they felt that they worked and that the images would be suitable for children where they were. I just want to quickly show another side. Oh, if it'll let me. It was working earlier. Here we are. This idea of memory and what I've just said, that to really make things stick, it needs to be very hands-on. And I think the smaller the child, the more hands-on, the better. So if you're going to make your letter E and it's going to be color-coded to help you learn vowels and everything, get the pipe cleaners out, bend them round, actually make them into the right shape, practice putting them together, feel it, do it, say it, see it, hear it, and try to keep your elephant as your main connection. And it's like tethering a boat to shore. If you have one rope, you want each of these multi-sensory activities to add the knots around that tether to keep your boat linked. And once that connection has been made in the brain, you can then add lots of other boats on behind and grow that connection. So a lot for us was learning how to work with brain connections, with hands-on learning, with making those links and helping through creativity and structure to build brain architecture from the word go. And on teaching the teachers simple routines. Some teachers were very, very unsure on how to make these links. So we gave very simple routines to show how to introduce a letter and then to do the practical side afterwards, and gave a whole framework of structure and supported them with mentoring visits that we made weekly when a school was new, and then once a fortnight once a school had been with us for a little longer. That is just a taste of all the big links. But this year we have brought out a new resource, knowing how important it is to match kindergarten to grade 1 and grade 2, which in Spanish we've called puente, bridge, because we wanted to show how these early skills can be approached in the kindergarten stage. Children can become familiar with just a few of the letters so that they know the song, they feel happy, so that when they move up into grade 1, some of that knowledge is already there, and that tree of knowledge then can grow more quickly. And we also look at the very early skills in the Puente resource of executive function. How can we help these little pupils with their ability to concentrate, to build their working memory little by little, with their cognitive flexibility, which is going to give them problem-solving aptitudes later on in life, and with their ability to inhibit the distractions in class that they don't want to pull them off task. So we know there are lots of very, very early skills that we can be building through early child education, which will lead into a far smoother step into the more formal learning, which we would be doing here, for example, in grade 1, color coding, visual clues, and then also in the creative side of life of actually physically seeing letters in action and making them, creating them, experiencing them under a structure that teachers can learn to follow. That's just a taste.
Muchas gracias, Alix. Sabemos que el programa que ustedes tienen tiene una
Thank you so
evaluación
much, Alex. We know your program has a results evaluation. Then we will go deeper, and then we will go later with that. But now with Brenda, according to the Guatemalan Ministry of Education and the National Core Curriculum, one of the main challenges has been to integrate linguistic and cultural diversity, especially in rural and indigenous areas. We know you're a reference in that work. Please tell us about how the national curriculum has managed to include that diversity and what lessons have they learned from this process that you can share with other countries with similar challenges. Yes, we have very particular characteristics in terms of the attention to the different communities. And as I mentioned before, the ordinance of the curriculum for the first 3 years of age or of life, we hadn't tackled any more that, and we hadn't seen that for many years. But last year, there was a modification on the curriculum for the pre-primary schools, 4, 5, and 6 years of age. In that context, we are doing, or we're creating a modification to the curriculum of the first childhood for the first 3 years of this. And what we want to guarantee with this curriculum is to have the necessary normative or regulation to guarantee the needs or to meet the needs of the education of this population. We have some access that one of them is the attention in the maternal language or tongue. It allows us to have a contextualization context or a concept that refers to each characteristic of every region, of every culture, what they consider in each one of these axes, the cultural equity and the gender equity, that is also important in terms of the attention they receive, and also it considers the aspects that should be given in terms of the equity by diversity to attend the diverse populations with disabilities. We have an education focus based on integration and inclusive attention. So for us, it is a law to use the maternal tongue. Not always we find the professionals that have the knowledge and that also manage the language or speak the language, but it is by law that we have to work. And this modification that is being done to the initial curriculum, it's related to the curriculum of the pre-primary school, and that pre-primary school curriculum is related to the one of the primary and secondary school from the first grade of primary school. So for us, that is an advantage, and we make sure that these attention lines are a reality. Also, the implementation of attention is also given through prioritized areas, and these prioritized areas are the poorest ones, the bilingual ones, the ones that are so remote, and with people from the Afro-descending ethnics. Another situation that we use here to assure the context and to assure the attention to all the population is that we are designing the model of attention to the first childhood. That was something we didn't have. This attention model gives us the regulations and the indications of how this attention should be, what are these quality standards that we should consider and not miss in terms of the different modalities that can be designed to attend the first childhood. It considers the curriculum, it considers the characteristics of population, it considers what the educational reform mandates, and also something that is very valuable is that it is given as a specific guidelines about the attention modalities. Now we have the community modality, the one that I mentioned before, but it also opens a door to the design of direct modalities for the childhood that has been known as care centers. We don't want to call them like that, but that's direct attention to the childhood, and also the possibility of creating attention models for populations with particular characteristics and vulnerability processes. Let's say, for example, the children who are imprisoned because of their mother is a prisoner. Let's say a woman who has a child between 0 and 4 years of age, they are in the prison with them. We are not attending those children. Children who are hospitalized. We have some hospital schools, but we need to reinforce that, and we need to increase the quality of that attention, and also a population that we should serve. And this attention model gives us the guidelines to guarantee from these characteristics they have, the children who are under internal migration or displacement. You know that Guatemala is a strong part for the migration of other populations, and this model is giving us these guidelines in how to support these children. Thank you so much, Brenda, for this interesting summary about the challenges that it poses to attend or to serve these specific communities. We value this a lot. I just wanted to reinforce that in the framework of the KICS ecosystem, we have some initiatives about applied research that tackles these conversations. I understand we have UNBEP, and we have also the Dakar Forum and Universidad del Valle that has worked in these projects of inclusive pedagogy, of gender for early childhood education, but improvement in the literacy processes through the use of certain networks, just to appoint them. And then we will share some things with Florencio, some contributions made by this work line on applied research in KICS. Thank you so much, Brenda. I want to go back to Veda, with Veda. Okay, so the educational reform in Dominica has promoted a comprehensive curriculum in which teacher training has been a key component. This has included training in the ECE on child-centered learning. And in this context, what elements have been key in the implementation of teacher training that supports the updated curriculum in Dominica?
Okay, so thank you. So with all what was happening, we still had a challenge with curriculum. We noticed that there was a challenge with curriculum. As I said, there were private institutions, and what we observed was that persons were just pulling topics from the internet, or they were using activity books for drill and practice, which was not developmentally appropriate. So I recall in 2007, I attended one of our regional conferences, and I was asked for 3 different priorities. So I wrote on my paper for priority 1, curriculum, priority 2, curriculum, and priority 3, curriculum. So it showed that there was a real need for us to have something developmentally appropriate. By 2008, Dominica became one of 4 other countries assisted by UNICEF to implement the high school preschool curriculum. So from 2008, we have been adopting the high school preschool curriculum. For that, then teachers would have had to be trained. So I became a trainer of trainers. So since then, I have been training the teachers in the institutions directly. But we also realized that we needed pedagogy. We needed emphasis on pedagogy. At one point in time, there was a teachers training program at the Dominica State College for our teachers, but that had stopped, that no longer existed. And the Ministry of Education then took up the slack, and we partnered with the University of the West Indies in implementing a 2-year certificate program for our teachers. So from I think we started in 2018 thereabout, and since then it has been continuing. Now, what the program is so designed that at the end of every course you get a certificate, because the teachers who are at our pre-kindergartens, they are paid by the government, they are contracted by government, and their contracts have to be renewed annually, sometimes every 2 years. And we did not want them to wait at the end of 2 years to show that they were developing themselves. So at the end of every course, they would get a certificate and to show that, yes, they are developing themselves and they want their contracts to be renewed. So that program is still ongoing, and we are happy that the University of the West Indies has partnered with us. In terms of the roving caregivers program, the early stimulation program, we have also adapted the high school infant and toddlers curriculum. And so the caregivers follow a curriculum that has been adapted to suit our context here in Dominica. And So both programs follow the same curriculum. So there is continuity and ease of transition. Now, as we know that the high scope curriculum focuses on active participatory learning. So children learn by doing and by interacting with the adult. We, of course, use our local languages. The high school curriculum does not bar anybody from using our language, our local languages. We do have Creole, which is one of the main local languages. We have the Kalinagos, who also speak a Kalinago language. And children are allowed to speak the language from which, that they have learned at home when they come in. And the adults are also trained to speak with these children and to get them to transition, because for many of them, English is taught as a second language, okay? So we are thankful now to UNICEF for helping us to outfit our centers, because the curriculum, for you to be able to implement a curriculum, you need the learning environment. So UNICEF has been a very big partner with us from the inception in implementing our high school preschool curriculum. They have been assisting us in ensuring that we have furniture that is developmentally appropriate, that we also have the manipulatives that are developmentally appropriate. And we also want to thank Hands Across the Sea, which partners with us for providing these institutions with books, and most recently with a program, the Early Pages program. So we are thankful for our partners. And as we continue to focus on curriculum, we also partner with Israel, who assist with the area of disaster risk reduction, because climate change is a big thing for us here in Dominica, having been affected by Tropical Storm Erica, Hurricane Maria, and being right there smack in the middle of the hurricane belt. We assist our institutions in putting together our operation plan. So all that forms part of the curriculum framework.
Muchas gracias, Veda. Creo que fuiste muy clara sobre
Thank you
todo
so
eso.
much, Veda. You were very clear about this part of curriculum, especially. Alice, so connecting with the previous intervention, we wanted to talk about this evaluation that you have made about your model. Tell us a little bit about some of your learning, some key points that you consider that are relevant in order to share based on the evaluation of the results.
Results or the children's results? Or both?
Puede ser de los dos. Así es.
Both.
We've learned a lot, and education is complicated because needs vary so much from one region to another, from one child to another, from one teacher to another. So I think what we've really learned is to try and keep the data relevant to what you need to know and what you need to follow up on, and to offer very simple routines that teachers of all different abilities become familiar with, and those who learn them quickly can, of course, bring in all their own routines. So there's a flexibility and there's a tension between routine, structure, consistency, and creativity, because you never want to stop a child's creativity or a teacher's creativity in how they deliver something. You want to offer security in the routine for teachers who don't feel secure, and consistency so that you're building and the children become familiar with the routine, and then they can become much more independent much more quickly. But you want to also offer creativity so a teacher can bring in their own ways of doing things. So we have learnt to measure all sorts of different things, but one of the things we measure is the skills that we call super profe skills in Chile, which is teaching skills linked to the standards that the teaching standards which Chile produces. Chile has 12 teaching standards, and we link our super profe skills very, very closely to those teaching standards, and then make adjustments for our own program and the emphasis that our own program has. Our mentors go into the schools and they are alongside the teachers to observe what's going on in class, to look at the super profe skills, to say, well, you're doing brilliantly in this area, this area, this area. How can I help you now with your planning or with your monitoring or with your feedback? And they very precisely pull out what that teacher needs. So we look at that. And then, of course, our objective is to help small children in grades 1 and grade 2, and now in kindergarten as well, to be successful in learning to read with comprehension. And what we have also done is to try and put in a one-to-one evaluation so that the child is not reading to a computer, which of course is the main way forwards for lots of schools where resources of one-to-one are short. But we at the moment have a reading team in each school that we work with, where we encourage the school to get a group of assistants or head teachers even to come in and to sit with the class as a little group once, or if possible twice a week, to hear children read, and that they can then check how the children are doing on their high frequency word lists that we provide, so we know the structure and the road that we're going down. And they can really listen to children read, because 30% of the families we work with in Chile, at least, don't have books at home. So reading at home isn't an option because there are no books at home to read with. So the practice in school is vital, absolutely vital, as is saying to families that can find books or stories online to read at home, giving them the information that if you listen to your child read, even once or twice a week, you are growing their vocabulary range so much more. And the studies done by the University of Ohio give some amazing figures on this, that if you were to listen to a child reading every single day, you times by 63 times the amount of words that child will have heard by the time they arrive at school age 5. So giving families this early information as to how they can support their children at home. And we also make all our resources freely available on our websites. It's Alfadeca in Chile and it's Jumpstart SVG in the Caribbean, because if they're freely available, teachers can look at them, they can look at the routines, families can look at them, they can match what's going on in school with what they want to maybe do for 10 minutes at home, make it into a game. And we focus heavily too on showing those games and including families in the conversation where possible, so that we unite school and family together on the one pathway towards literacy. Sorry, that was rather a long answer in the end.
Muchas gracias, Alix. Siempre tan generosa con tu
Thank you,
intervención
Alex.
con tu conocimiento y con
Thank
los
you for
materiales
sharing
que
your
estás a
knowledge and the
disposición.
materials that
Nos
are
quedan algunos
available.
minutitos.
We have a few
Me
minutes now
gustaría invitar
where I'd
también al
like to
público
invite the audience, the
en
public,
abrir este espacio para
and
preguntas,
opening this space
comentarios,
for questions,
reacciones.
comments,
Sabemos que por acá
reactions. We
tenemos
know that over here we have,
justamente que lo mencionaba
I mean,
anteriormente, algunos representantes
we have some
de
representatives
estas investigaciones aplicadas que hacen parte de lo
applied
que es el
research, which
sistema
are
de
part
KICS.
of this KICS
Una de estas es la
ecosystem.
Universidad del Valle, Foro de
Universidad del
Dakar, la
Valle,
UMEP,
or
también quieren
Dakar,
tener alguna
OMEP. Maybe
reacción,
they have some reactions
compartirnos
or
algunos
comments,
aprendizajes
sharing
que se
some of the
vienen
learnings
dando a partir de las
that have
investigaciones. Siempre
occurred from
bienvenidos.
research.
También
All of those
Carlos,
comments
tú
are so
estás
welcome.
bienvenido
Carlos, you're also
a
welcome
preguntar, a
to
compartir
ask
reacciones
questions,
inmediatas
to
sobre
share some
sobre los
opinions about
panelistas que
these
nos han planteado
three
reflexiones súper
panelists
interesantes
who
de
have,
los
I mean,
desafíos que
mentioned
están
really important
ahí
things
en el
related to
territorio.
challenges there
Así que
in this
veamos
territory.
quién
So,
quiera
let's see.
preguntar. Jessica,
Are there any questions? Jessica?
Jessima Cooper nos pregunta
Jessica Cooper is
efectivamente
asking.
sobre
Is asking
si
about
tenemos un lugar,
if we have
website
any website
donde podamos compartir.
where we
Sí,
can
lo vamos a
share
compartir.
all of
Alix
this
nos dijo
material.
algunas
Yes,
cosas.
we're
Yo
going to
voy a
share
encontrar
it.
toda la información para compartirlos y que puedan
We're
conocer la
going to
experiencia.
share these all so you can
A
all
ver,
know this
veamos
experience.
quién
Let's see.
está interesado en compartirnos o reaccionar.
Who's willing to give some comments?
Unos segunditos por acá.
So just a minute.
Antes nos habían hecho una pregunta.
So there was a
Ana
question over
Castillo
here.
justo
Ana
nos preguntaba, no
Castillo
sé si alguno
was
quiera,
asking, I don't know if
Brenda,
any of
Veda,
you, Brenda, Veda,
Alix también,
or
cómo
Alix,
influye el desarrollo del
how does
aprendizaje,
the learning
el aprendizaje de los
development
niños, las condiciones de los
influence
contextos
learning? I mean,
socioculturales, seculares y
sociocultural context, how do they
familiares.
influence
Y yo a
learning?
eso le
Family
sumo,
context. And
cómo,
I
cómo se están
also want to
haciendo
add,
cargo los
how
ministerios
are
o Fundación
ministers taking
Rassmuss de
charge of
estos
Erasmus
desafíos. Los
institution, I mean,
tenemos en las
facing
cuentas
these
de Brenda.
challenges? Brenda, maybe you'd like to start?
Qué pregunta más compleja.
That is a really difficult question.
Bueno,
Let's
yo les
see.
comentaba en la primera
I was
intervención
telling you in my
que,
first
si
intervention
bien es cierto,
that
nosotros
it is
estamos
true.
realizando una
We're
serie de acciones
we're
encaminadas a
making
mejorar la
actions in
atención,
order to improve the service.
los desafíos más fuertes
I
que
mean, the biggest
tenemos
challenges that we
es
have
probablemente
are
el cambio
probably
de comportamiento social.
the change of social behavior.
De hecho, tenemos algunas
In fact,
intervenciones
we have some
encaminadas justamente
interventions
a eso,
in order to solve that
porque,
or to work on that.
como dice una compañera
Because
de la
as
escuela,
a
cuando nosotros
colleague
estamos
just
hablando de
mentioned,
cómo
when
atender
we're
a la
talking
primera
about on how
infancia,
to serve this first
estamos
infancy,
hablando
we're
muchas
talking
veces de
about oftentimes
contradecir
of
la información
contradicting
que nos ha dado nuestra
information which is being
mamá,
provided by
nuestra
my
abuela,
mom,
y
our
nuestra
grandma,
suegra.
our
Entonces
mother-in-law.
hay un ojo
So there
comunitario
is a
familiar
communitary
que
or
nos
public or
cuestiona en
family
cuanto a
element
la
questioning
atención
us
de las niñas y los niños.
when serving or
Luego
giving
creo
information
que
to
son
children.
cambios lentos
Then later,
que
this has
requieren
changes which are
una
slow and they require an
intervención muy bien
intervention
pensada,
which is really
muy
well
bien
thought,
diseñada.
really well designed.
Y nosotros, por ejemplo, en
And
el
for
caso de
instance, in the
Guatemala,
case of
estamos
Guatemala,
abriendo brecha en
we're
cuanto a la
opening
atención
gaps
a una atención que
we
históricamente ha
want
sido
to have
delegada a la
a
mujer.
service
Y no
which
solo ha
is,
sido
I mean,
delegada a la mujer,
historically
sino
it's been on hands of
que
women, and now
hay un desentendimiento de parte de las instituciones, incluso de
institutions
parte de
do not
integrantes de la
really
familia,
want to take
hacia lo que es
charge,
la
and some
atención
members of
a
the
la
family
infancia.
do not want to
¿Cuál es el
serve
impacto que
first
nosotros
infancy. So what is the
queremos y
impact that we
esperamos
want
poder
and we
lograr
hope to
en
achieve
este proceso, en todas
in this
estas
process, in
intervenciones y
all of
con
these
todos estos
interventions,
esfuerzos?
and with all of
Pues
these efforts?
definitivamente
Well,
la construcción
the construction, we
de
want to say that the
mentalidades
construction
diferentes,
of
la
different
apertura a establecer
mentalities,
bases para el
mindset, we
desarrollo
need to
académico y
set,
creación, no
and we
solo
need to
en los adultos, sino
create
sobre
development,
todo
not
en
only
las
in adults, but
infancias,
above all in
en su
first
desarrollo,
infancy, in the early development.
que eso genere nuevas
That should create new
oportunidades para toda la
opportunities
población.
for the whole population.
Tratar, creo yo, que
We want to try, I
nuestra
mean,
meta
our
es
main
disminuir
goal,
la
it is
desigualdad,
lowering
independientemente
inequality,
de
no
dónde nazca un
matter
niño o una
where
niña
a child
guatemalteca,
is
ya sea en
born
el
in
área rural o en
Guatemala,
el área
in the
urbano,
rural or in the
o en una
urban
familia
area.
indígena o una
If they are
familia
coming from an indigenous
identificada
family or a
la
family
DINA, las
identified as,
oportunidades de desarrollo, de
non-indigenous. So
salud,
the
de
development,
protección y de
opportunities for
inclusión
protection,
sean las
development,
mismas
and
en
care
el
should
marco
be
de
the
sus
same
contextos,
in
para
their
que
different
sean
contexts, of
dignas
course,
y que
but
tengan las
the
mismas
opportunities should be the
oportunidades de
same for
convertirse
all of them
en
so they can turn
ciudadanos
into
que
citizens
puedan participar,
who can
que puedan
participate,
desarrollar
who
sus
can
habilidades y
develop their
lograr nuevas
skills, and that
metas.
can also optimize their development.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Veda.
Thank you, Brenda. Veda.
Okay, so for us, the emphasis is on holistic development. We want to ensure that children get it right from the start. Whatever we practice in indigenous communities, we practice also in our indigenous communities, and that is not only for early childhood, it's also within the primary and secondary school systems. The reason for selecting the curriculum that we did is because we know it is an internationally acclaimed curriculum. It focuses on active participatory learning, and it helps in setting the right foundation for learning, and not just for learning, but for life. Okay, so sometimes we may want to reinvent the wheel, and we may maybe waste resources on trying to do so. But there are practices, that best practices that are available, and we had other options, but we selected the high school preschool curriculum. So in doing so, we are also hoping that all children will be able to perform at their levels when they enter primary school. We do have a monitoring checklist that we use to ensure that, progress is being made, that children are actually learning. For those within the 0 to 2 age range, we use the ages and stages curriculum questionnaire, and from 3 years up to grade 2, because whatever it is that we practice continues within the formal education, we use an early identification to ensure that children are learning. And it focuses on all areas of learning, not just academia. We focus on holistic development. So emphasis is placed on physical, yes, intellectual, and of course, the social aspect of development. And even now, the social aspect of development has become even more important because we realize with the age of technology, there is less interaction between children and adults. Really and truly, the devices are what are raising our children. So even now, we are challenged with a number of children entering the service, being unable to speak. We have realized that being unable to do things, to be independent like they used to before, right? So even now more than ever, we need to really place emphasis on holistic development and ensuring that the social aspect, the social development of children are being.
Muchas gracias, Veda.
Thank you
Alix.
very much, Veda. Alix?
I couldn't agree with you more, Veda. I'm so delighted to hear you talking about this holistic approach because in my years of teaching, I have really seen the importance of that, and importance early on, and of teaching those early skills of listening, thinking, think before you speak, and all those early skills of trying to bring that in. And also just in our work, we've seen children who are no longer able to form the pincer grip because they at home are not doing the baking and the plasticine and the artwork and all of that kind of thing. And they can come in able to do this because they can swipe across the screen, but they haven't got that basic pincer grip of muscle strength there, which will allow them to then hold a pencil successfully, even for colouring. So that holistic approach and looking at more is fantastic. Great that you're doing it. And in our work, our focus is very much on literacy, yes, but into that, we want to have children speaking, communicating, creating, working in a group, working collaboratively. We show our teachers games that they can do that will encourage all that social structure, all that knowledge that will then build community. And I think community and sharing good practice is one of the greatest things we have learnt. And a WhatsApp community we have really found has been fantastic for teachers to share best practice. And we get lovely examples of someone saying, this worked brilliantly with my children this week, and I found this song, or I found this activity, and we share between us the best practices, and we learn things from each other all the time. And I think co-developing any resource is also absolutely key, because when we started in the Caribbean a year ago, the needs there were very different in many ways to the needs in Chile. The letters had to be redesigned, the vocabulary had to be rethought. I had to rethink my vocabulary. Words like vex, which I would not have put into grade 1, was brought into grade 1 because it's a word used in St. Vincent. And you have to make things relevant and workable, but also keep them simple enough so you get the overview, I think. And that will always be a challenge when scaling up consistency, clarity, co-development, they also use creativity, community. I think those would be the overriding, and also a vision of where you want to go. And I wondered if I could just show one last slide. Forgive me, sorry, now I'm drifting backwards and forwards, but on the slides.
Claro que sí, Alix, muy concreto, eso sí, porque vamos con el
Yes,
tiempo.
really brief
Okay,
because we're
so
running out of
just one
time.
last slide to show that communication is, of course, at the heart of everything in teaching. But if you can show where you want to go, I think if you can show this to your schools, your teachers, your families, and your pupils of the road that you're going to take, because then they can see the bigger picture and see where they are in it. So we have a summary here of joining the hands and the bodies and the eyes together, and then sorting out how you're going to learn to read with vowels and consonants and high frequency words, building with fluency, the light of fluency, and the drops of goodness of vocabulary. That is how you're going to arrive at comprehension. And it's a long and complex journey. But if you can see the bigger picture, you are encouraged to keep going and to get there in the end. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Alix.
Thank you very much,
Carlos,
Alix.
gracias por levantar
Carlos,
la mano porque
thank you
justo
for
nos
raising your hand,
gustaría
because
que
now
compartas
I
tenías una
wanted to ask
reflexión
if you
general
have
y
any
luego
final
la
thought
sesión y
or
vamos
any
entonces a hacer
reaction.
el cierre.
Really briefly, thank you. Just about this question related to The influence of family context and prior interventions have aimed to interesting things here about the possibility and the role of the curriculum and quality frameworks for aligning the experience that children have in the family surrounding and in the educational centers. We have seen, for example, cases of countries where the introduction of curriculum for competences, and there is some rejection from some families to detach from the more traditional goals where they were brought up on, reading and writing, for instance. I want my child to learn counting, and I want him to know how to read. That is the mission. And sometimes they do not facilitate educators who are trying to implement this curriculum, which is related to competences. Another example is the one of technology. Sometimes a curriculum and a quality framework can also give indications to parents over problems in the use of technology, technofriends, and some other problems. So the final reflection of thought is that the quality frameworks and curriculums, it is good to communicate and to share them with families so they also understand what is happening in the educational center. So they can also support that. They should be more aligned in, the goals of these two areas. Thank you, Carlos. And of course, thank you. We want to thank our panelists. We celebrate the achievements, the advancements. It give us some hope to know that territories are advancing, but also we also consider we take charge of those challenges, gaps, and how collectively we take charge of that. I just want to mention that there are still some questions and some thoughts over here where we're receiving questions related to the key actions about inclusion of children with disability. I want to tell you that we're working in a document analyzing different policies, which is going to have some experiences in some countries in order to address the conversation. So we have Brenda and Veda, they're experts in that topic. And of course, we're going to invite them once again to talk about that. And we have a pending conversation about teachers, training, initial teachers training, which we're going to address soon. So now I'm connecting this last thought that you are doing about this challenge or these challenges, the challenge of the different areas where children learn, in order to give the floor to our last guest, Amanda Sherlip. Amanda was executive director in Hands Across the Sea. She was also the creator of Early Page program that Veda commented. And currently, she works from her avant-garde consultant, advising NGOs, corporations, foundations, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurship in the design of sustainable strategies, which can be measurable with high impact. Amanda is going to give some final thoughts, which is complementary, where she's going to share some advancement and learnings of what it was, the 80 pages program, highlighting the impact on literacy, early literacy, and the importance of creating literacy environments from the home and communities. Amanda, thank you very much for being here, and you're most welcome. Concretely then, please, the floor is yours.
Hi there. So I know we're tight on time, so I'm going to just jump right into it. So I joined Hand Across the Sea in June 2020. And so we were in the thick of the pandemic. I am a firm believer, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so during that time, coming in as a new director, taking over a 13-year-old founder organization, I was in a position where I could assess what our programs were. And during that time, I just determined that several programmatic activities that our NGO was engaging in were not contributing meaningfully enough to advancement in the community and growing our mission appropriately. We're a US-based NGO, and we had begun as an organization in the Eastern Caribbean focused on the resource gap in children's library materials, specifically in school libraries, not classroom libraries. And over time, we grew from being a mom and pop shop to becoming really this almost like very big book buyer. But the needle had already moved in the region where we were working, and now we were looking at there being challenges in the implementation and usage and outcomes of these materials, because implementing books doesn't create behavioral change. So during COVID, we had the opportunity to assess that the work that we had done had been extremely successful from K through 12. However, as everybody here would know, 0 to 5 and 0 to 3 especially, but 0 to 5 are critical times for early childhood literacy development. In Grenada, we had one of our program officers whose area of expertise is in early childhood development. And so it seemed like a great opportunity to pilot a program. So the evolution of this program was essentially I came to the Grenada team and I said, I have a hypothesis if we design a program in a particular fashion and we pilot it for 2 years and we ensure that we have the full buy-in of the Grenadian government and the permission from the early childhood unit, that we can pilot this in 10 schools. And so over the course of 2 years, that is what we did. We did a micropilot as well in Nevis because it's really important to be able to see a program in two different contexts. And there are key differences from a country like Grenada and Nevis, while there are also tremendous amount of overlap. Part of what helped to drive how this program was defined, well, there's kind of two key aspects of how this program was designed. So one is there's just factual information that really is difficult to dispute about case studies, right? So we understand certain key things will inevitably lead to greater outcomes for children in literacy and for societies. And those things are about parental involvement, community engagement, literacy, and print-rich environments. It's just that simple, and having materials. The other side of it is you never really want to swim upstream if you don't have to. We at Hands Across the Sea are a policy partner with the OECS. And so with access to the OESS, which is the sector strategy, I was aware of what the key priorities were for the region, which Veda may be able to check me on this one, but I think it was priority one was access to early childhood and special needs resources. Now, in those definitions, I come from, an extensive background in all this type of work, and I could quickly assess these are really well-defined, fantastic goals. They're out of alignment with regional and national capacity in terms of financial and human capital. And so what I was able to do was leverage the trust that we had, the fact that these were already needs, and I just kind of took a shot in the dark and I ran with the program with the permission of and the partnership of the Grenadian government. And then we presented on it at the Council of Ministers. So over the course of 2 years, we piloted, and so you could put this piloting under the heading of what does it look like to co-create? What does it look like to partner? We piloted this program. Under this program, we had a structured framework, and we would begin the year with an orientation of the early childhood unit and the preschool teachers. You have to come under the assumption that the entry point for preschool teachers is a different level of education across the board. And so while in Grenada, all of the preschool teachers may have a degree. In Dominica, preschool teachers may be coming from a different educational background, but they've all chosen to be there for some reason or another, and they don't all have the skills or the resources available to them. So the teachers underwent a training and an orientation. The other decision in this program, as Veda mentioned, the Common Core curriculum is being utilized not just in Dominica, but throughout the OECS. It's an expensive curriculum. And so to have that much resource put into that curriculum and not see it play out in the outcomes was a real pain point from me from an observational side. And that touches on how do you make sure that you're regionally and locally contextualizing a curriculum. And so the Early Pages program intended to take that into account as well. And so we brought in teacher training, ongoing support, contextualization, and then really just making things as simple and clear as possible and thinking, how do you get buy-in? And so the layers of buy-in for this program, and let me rewind for a moment. The key points of this program is think of it as three-pronged. One is create a explicitly literacy-rich environment in a preschool. And so, and I'll share a little bit more about this, but literacy is woven into all the aspects when you walk into and you exist in this preschool environment. Two, how do you create parental involvement? Not engagement, but involvement. How do parents become active participants in what is occurring? And then three, how do you build community engagement? And I do think that that community piece, it has value in every context. I think that it's uniquely valuable in areas like the Caribbean where community and celebration are so much a part of the fibers of life. And so that seemed like a really big opportunity. So that community piece was actually something that came in drawing upon what we already saw occurring naturally in some of the high performing preschools and communities in Nevis. We saw that they were encouraging certain evenings to bring a blanket and read a book in the community. And then COVID hit, and the assumption was what we all felt, which is people are lonely, people are seeking opportunities to re-engage. Let's create community opportunities around children learning and reading. So we took these ideas into Grenada. And so to the literacy rich and explicitly literacy driven environments, we looked at the Common Core curriculum and we said, how is it, I'm sorry, not Common Core, high scope curriculum. Very different. We looked at the high scope curriculum and we said, how is it that books can be utilized to accomplish these goals? Because these teachers cannot take on more, they have to take on different. And the teachers were stressed and they were nervous and they were uncomfortable because in the beginning, this was challenging for them. And we asked them to trust us based on their work with us for years, knowing that we were not going to leave their side as they learned this and that we have only ever seen success when we have worked together. And so we asked them to trust us in working a little harder for change, and they would see that this would turn at some point, and it would turn through their preparation for their classrooms would become more standardized and easier and clearer, that they would be more structured and organized, and that their children would be more excited, well-behaved, and predictable in the school environment, because that is inevitable with early childhood literacy development, that you're going to have social, cognitive, and behavioral growth. We asked the directors to allow us access to families. And so we went to PTA meetings and we spoke to families and we let them know these are the expectations we have of you. There's a parent agreement that is signed. And we filled the schools with great books. And that's really important. We have removed, when we were early in our years, the founders had teachers submitting requests for books. Respectfully, teachers' awareness and understanding of what the children are being motivated by differs greatly from what the children are motivated by. And so we bring outside people to do so. And we worked with the children in the schools reading the books so that they could go home and model it for the parents, because you have to make the assumption of parental illiteracy or apathy. We leveraged the fact that parents of 3 to 5-year-olds are exhausted. They don't necessarily know how to occupy their children's time during that time. It's also the time where they're most desperate for support and help. So by creating these frameworks in the classroom and then designing ways that we're asking parents to help us accomplish goals in the classroom, in the preschool classrooms, the parents are now signing on to having a really structured way of how do you read at home with the children, or different activities they'd be doing. We had in our first year, we had parents with the book I Am an Apple going home and baking apple pies, creating juices, coming up with all these. One child did a research paper on how the apple tree, its origins were in China. I still haven't fact checked that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. And the families were taking field trips to the only apple tree in Grenada with their children and filming it and sending it back to the school. What you see is that these practices became integrative in helping to pursue numeracy goals, bringing books in with numbers. But what winds up happening is the children are surrounded in an environment by literacy in every way. And so our program is essentially use one book for the course of a month and follow these action plans. The action plans are designed to precisely align with what it is that the high scope would be expecting. So potentially all we're asking you to do is what you're already supposed to be doing, but that everybody is too tired and confused to do. And then to create art and create activities that become what is all over the walls of your school, and to have parents come in. Now, if you read the early pages manual, You'll see this all in a very clear linear fashion. I'll put that link in the chat. But this is very, very structured. Now, in the beginning, what we saw was resistance, fear, as I had noted. By the end of it, we have seen even parents whose children have graduated on beyond preschool still going back to their children's preschool to read to the children on Fridays. What we have seen is community members donating money into a readathon, programs. We have evolved with our community. So the geography of Dominica and the topography of Dominica are going to look very different than in Nevis or in Grenada. And so we've worked with people like Veda to come up with, okay, if we can't get these resources from the ministry for a day off in all one place, how do we do pocket trainings without diluting this? In terms of community, we're also building community for the preschools because preschool teachers are isolated in many contexts versus primary school teachers who they have the other second grade teachers and all of the other teachers in the environment. We also asked the ministry to please step back from looking at early childhood literacy as a point A and point B of now your reading scores at grade 4 are going to be up. There's been an exorbitant amount of research that has shown that that is not the pathway to success in terms of evaluating a great early childhood program. And in reality, what you're going to be doing is actually needing to look at the reduction in crime when those children reach secondary school age. You're going to be looking at the reduction in, Alix touched on this, intervention for things like occupational therapy because the pincer grip is gone, right? So high scope, it engages, one of the 10 needs is writing. And so we touched on that. Veda touched on, what I would refer to as like mother tongue. What is it that you're using in your home? Well, this in the Caribbean context, this manual says we explicitly honor your dual language. Now, from a literacy perspective, we need to clarify that you understand which language it is that you're working in, because if you cannot clarify it, you do not know which language you're thinking in, and your comprehension is affected. And so it is, we are making sure that the children understand that they're reading in English because this is a part of what the curriculum is. And it still works with if you're doing dual language within the school. So it's about that differentiation. This has been a real joy to watch it take off like wildfire. We now have demand for this. It was designed with the intention of being scalable. The goal is for it to be an open access resource. The manual is filled with living examples of what other teachers did. There's a lot of work that has to be done from the organizational level, monitoring, morale, ongoing training, making sure that people aren't only using the examples that they're reading, but continuing to grow examples, continuing to collect the examples, because there's going to need to be growth and revision with this over time. We see that Grenada has already been discussing integrating this program into their early childhood policy revision, and that's very exciting. I've stepped out of the role, so I don't know where they are with that, but I hope I've touched upon everything that would be useful, but I'm here to answer any questions. I really wanted to take this time instead to listen to what it is that you all as panelists were discussing, so I could, leverage what this program is doing kind of in its implementation in alignment with what sort of like the global and regional vision are. I can't emphasize enough how so much of this is driven by the Caribbean and, the West Indies so often gets lumped into Caribbean and Latin America. And there's a real challenge when it comes to programmatic sharing. And it's not only Latin America, but there's also groups that in 2020 and 2021 were focusing on how do we take these programs that we did, and it was in Africa, and apply them here. And the West Indies has a distinct culture and distinctive different languages. And so I'm a proponent for and leverage this program as a way to show you can use best practices and you can stay within global alignment while still kind of micro tailoring this to where you are to leverage your greatest outcomes.
Muchas gracias, Amanda, por este recorrido tan comprensivo.
Thank you, Amanda, for all this process that you have shown us from hands across and in the Caribbean, and that we value that a lot, and how we share these learning processes in these sub-regions. And we thank you so much for that. So I want to close this panel. We just have one person to invite, and that is Florencio Ceballos. He is a program officer in IDRC Canada, and he will give us some final thoughts and an invitation for this. Florencio, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mar. I'm here. So this is the last part, and it's kind of difficult to talk in this moment when we are kind of delayed. So I want to thank Mar and Suma team to organize this. I think I am in the final part of this virtuous cycle that has allowed us to confirm that this type of learning meetings make more sense when they are held in time, when there is continuity, when there is progression, when there is time for discussion, when there is thematic coherence, something that we did in our first childhood, when we have this theme connection with the people from the GPE, and doing this without any shortcuts, extracting the complexity, the multidimensionality of these situations, of these challenges, of these opportunities, bringing the expertise at a global level, covering the different aspects, the teachers' aspects, curriculum models, practice, financing. From KICS, from the GPE KICS, this is a topic that we have worked for a very long time. We have this link that I will share with you about a report that was prepared based on 10 research projects on the early childhood, and that confirms what we have said, especially in Africa, and it confirms what we have said here, the challenge to training and the professional development as an important barrier for teachers, that feeling the possibility to teach certain pedagogies, these things about of the engagement of community and parents in the success of programs, the participation of the civil society, and the dimension of equity, inclusion, not only in the gender, that is very important for the social justice. And finally, this relation of these with the discussion about sustainability and scalability of the programs and innovations. So I don't want to extend, I don't want to speak much more, but thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone. I will see you next time, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those who came from El Salvador, attendees from El Salvador, Guatemala, St. Vincent. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye,
It
Vera.
was a pleasure. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Amanda,
Bye.
Alix.
Bye, thank you.
See you the next time.
Bye. Bye, Raúl.
Very much.
Muchas gracias a nuestros intérpretes, como siempre.